Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Welcome to The Tom Woods Show. It's episode 2500 on the nose. And unfortunately, we have to talk about a really, really depressing topic. So I'd like to say, Robert, it's like when you see people at a funeral and you say, I'm sorry I have to see you under these circumstances. It's the same kind of thing. But Robert Barnes, for my money, is the best legal commentator out there, founder of BarnesLaw, LLP, co-host of VivaBarnesLaw, where you get, just top. I don't want to listen to anybody else. I'll just be honest with you. I don't. So Robert, welcome.
Glad to be here.
All right, we're going to talk about this Trump conviction. And I'm seeing a lot of people on the right saying, we got these 34 counts, guilty on all of them, but there's no, quote, underlying crime. What do they mean by that? Explain that.
So basically what President Trump was charged with is in New York a misdemeanor, creating false business records. The statute of limitations had expired on that, and they wanted to make it a felony. So in New York, it's a felony to falsify business records in order to commit or conceal another crime. That other crime was never identified. It wasn't identified in the indictment. It wasn't identified throughout the trial. It wasn't identified in the jury instructions. Instead, the judge said, just, kind of figure out, maybe there's something out there. So that's what they mean, that nobody even knows what crime he was convicted of. Example of this, I was explaining why there's big presidential immunity issues for President Trump, including that the Supreme Court's decision coming in the next 30 days may vacate this entire verdict. And I had people on the anti-Trump side on social media saying that can't be the case because this crime was committed before he was inaugurated as president. They don't even realize that isn't what Trump was charged with. That Trump's crime was the false business records while he was president, according to the allegations of the jury, not anything that happened beforehand. But the fact that people that followed the case intently, they don't even know what crime it was he was convicted of, tells you how absurd the case is.
What is this about? Well, I just watched a brief analysis by Alan Dershowitz, who ran through the whole thing, and he said, this is the worst case I've seen in 60 years. And he says, I think it's a very bad day for America, worse day for America than it is for Donald Trump, because maybe Trump might still get elected after all this, but for America, now we spiral downward to lawfare on all sides, people getting revenge for this. I'm not sure that, frankly, from what I've seen, that the right wing has it in them to do this. They've been sitting around thinking that, I think very naively about the state of American law. But he also mentioned, as we read about, the judge's, what he called false instructions to the jury. So what exactly did he say to the jury that was wrong?
The key aspect, there was multiple aspects with the jury instructions in general, but the big one was he told the jury they can convict Trump of a crime without even deciding what crime it was, without deciding it beyond a reasonable doubt, without all unanimous jurors agreeing as to what the crime was. And that's a jury instruction that has really never been issued in the history of the United States. It basically, he took Maria's show me the man, I'll find you the crime principle, and that was his instruction to the jury, with Kafka's The Trial. And he decided, let's see what it would look like if we combine the two in real time. And that's the nature of the jury instruction. It's not only an issue under New York law, it's an issue under federal constitutional law. It gives the Supreme Court of the United States jurisdiction to hear this appeal at some point because it's a due process issue. Not only you have a due process right to know what it is you're being accused of from the beginning in this Alice in Wonderland prosecution that was denied, but you're also entitled to unanimous jurors on any element of the offense and into a beyond a reasonable doubt standard as well. And that was eviscerated by the jury instructions.
Is it what we're reading is that the bookkeeping miscategorized a hush payment. I mean, is that the heart of the case, or what?
Yeah, essentially, Michael Cohen issued a legal invoice for legal expenses. The bookkeeper, who never took any instructions from Trump, saw that. And so when it was paid, booked it internally as a legal expense because that's the option in the drop-down menu. They converted that into a state felony. And the way they converted that into a state felony is they claimed that apparently you're supposed to list a non-disclosure agreement as hush payment to make sure nobody knows that I paid this money, which is, by the way, you can find the accounting records, find your GAAP principles, try to find the one where it says, thou shalt forever declare any non-disclosure agreement as a secret hush money payment in explicit and express terms of the bookkeeping. So they made up something on accounting that doesn't exist. And then they made up a federal crime that the FEC admitted didn't happen here. Really what they did is they took Hillary Clinton's crime, where she was doing illegal investigative work using foreign agents to spread the lie about Russiagate, and she disguised it all to hide it from the FEC as legal fees. So that was like the actual crime actually committed in New York. And they just pretended Trump did it by converting an NDA disclosure issue into accounting fraud, bookkeeping fraud, and election fraud.
Tucker Carlson made a statement on Twitter that I couldn't agree with more, and he ended it by saying that anybody who defends this verdict is a danger to you and your family. You think that's an exaggeration?
Definitely not an exaggeration. I've told you, if you see any lawyer, legal advertiser, legal commentator, legal influencer in any way rationalizing, excusing, or justifying this case, they are a threat to the Republic and a threat to you. And you should take it accordingly. Because if they're willing to lie and libel the law, libel the Constitution in order to advance their political and personal and partisan agenda against the President of the United States and future President of the United States, then by golly, they'll do it to the rest of us. When people show you that they want to unleash the French Revolution, take them at their word and respond accordingly.
How do they get around the statute of limitations problem?
The statute of limitations only applied if it was a misdemeanor. And the way they got around it was by hijacking it and claiming, no, really, all of these bookkeeping entries were meant to cover up another crime. Problem was there was no other crime. So the judge said, just imagine there is one.
Okay. So I mean, it's like you can't believe. It's like when you go back and look, frankly, at the stuff about how they concluded that the COVID shot was 100% effective. It was that they had two groups. They had a control group, and one of them got 2 infections and one got 1. And since 2 is 100% more than 1, is 100% effective. I mean, it was just absolutely nuts. And you think, until you saw that document, you thought, they're probably exaggerating. And likewise with this case, I would hear commentators talking about it, and I'd say, maybe they're just being one-sided. And then you look at it yourself and you say, okay, I will never distrust them again. Now, the thing is, I think there's a bigger question that arises from all this. A lot of people have said there's no way Trump was going to get a fair trial in New York or in this area. There's no way he's going to get a fair trial. There's no way there's going to be a jury that will listen to this case impartially. So is there a bigger issue here with the jury system per se? Like, we've just come to imbibe the idea that it's just normal that there are parts of the country where you couldn't get a fair trial. I mean, is there anything that can be done about that?
There should be. I mean, you're constitutionally entitled to an impartial jury. You're not constitutionally entitled to any jury trial. It's an impartial jury. And this goes all the way back to the Magna Carta. The points of the knights was they were not just concerned with having a jury try them, they were concerned with having a jury of their peers try them. And while the jury of your peers is not within the Constitution, the impartiality principle reflects it and represents it. The reason why they wanted peers to judge them is they believed only peers were familiar with their particular profession or occupation or way of life to judge whether or not their actions were illegal or not. Here, we see in the January 6th cases, we see it in other DC cases where Democrats get to take a walk, We see it in other New York cases where Democrats, or if you're the right race or the right religion, you get to walk, that the impartial jury principle is being eviscerated. And as well as the venue and vicinage principles of the U.S. Constitution, both of which were intended to make sure you could only be prosecuted in your hometown, your home community, that only your home community could judge you. Here, that, of course, is Florida for Trump. So in my view, we need to reinvigorate, because the courts are failing to enforce these constitutional provisions, then we need to reinvigorate them with legislative reform as well, because he was denied an impartial prosecutor, he was denied an impartial judge, and he was denied an impartial jury. Every aspect that the Constitution is supposed to assure to determine truth, justice, and accuracy was denied Trump in this case.
Hey, everybody, one of the great things the COVID lockdowns and restrictions took from us was the unforgettable annual event that economist Bob Murphy and I hosted from 2016 to 2019, the Contra Cruise. Well, Bob prefers to stay on land at the moment, but with his blessing, I am announcing the Tom Woods Cruise. Remember from the Tom Woods show, Clifton Duncan, the Broadway actor who paid a devastating professional price for declining the COVID shots, but who's now creating a one-man show on the life and ideas of Thomas Sowell? Well, he's joining us too, and we'll get to hear his stunning singing voice that I bet you didn't even know he had. The first 50 people to sign up can join me on a special excursion on Roatan, Honduras, to a free private city there, of the kind the ambitious Free Cities movement has been promoting and that I've discussed on the Tom Woods Show. It's the closest thing to Ancapistan in our world today. Each of the first 50 people will also join me for dinner one night during the week. We're also going to put on the biggest murder mystery party I've ever held. And I have other great special guests joining us, including Scott Horton, as well as Paul Counts, who directs my mastermind programs, so all you business folks will have a chance to pick his brain during the week. We depart from Galveston, Texas on February 23rd, 2025, and return 1 week later on March 2nd. Make sure you're one of the first 50, and I'll see you on board. The website is tomwoodscruise.com. You can imagine, you don't need to imagine how the media has pounced on this. So Dershowitz says he was just interviewed by the Times of London, and they said, well, doesn't the very fact of his conviction on all these counts show that there was a strong case? And Dershowitz says, no, it doesn't show that at all necessarily. And I just saw the New York Times saying, well, this verdict now recasts the election fundamentally into a choice between somebody who is not a convicted felon and someone who is. And that's the way they're spinning it.
And it's been the goal all along, is to use these trials to effectively smear Trump in the court of public opinion, believing it will lead to his defeat. But the whole predicate of it is that they thought they could buy the confidence of the American people in the outcome of the case by putting on a show. That if you see a judge, you'll believe it's the law. If you see a jury, you'll believe it's the truth. If you see a prosecutor, you'll believe it's the fact. And what people on the libertarian side have long recognized, and now other people on the right are starting to recognize, just because a judge says it doesn't make it law. Just because a jury says it doesn't make it truth. Just because a cop or prosecutor says it doesn't make it fact. I'm dealing with this in another case, a prominent law YouTuber, Nick Rekieta, who's subject to what appears to me a rogue government action. And the conservatives are so caught up with what they've found in the illegal, unconstitutional search. And they're suddenly saying, well, if a prosecutor said it, it must be true. If a judge signed it, it must be law. And it's like the Trump case should remind all of them that's never been the case. And we're seeing it. The fact that if a jury of 12 Klansmen convicted Martin Luther King in 1963, when we go, well, a jury found the facts, so he must be guilty. That's how preposterous these claims are.
Well, one of the big questions that involves making a prediction, but that everybody is talking about and weighing in on, is whether or not there's going to be any jail time. What do you think?
I think that even if this lunatic, corrupt judge, whose family is enriching themselves off of this case, something else we've never seen before at this scale in America, if he were to, the normal sentence is probation under these circumstances. So for this kind of first-time offense, this category, this defendant, this situation, et cetera. But and this is the same New York that's busy releasing murderers and rapists and child abusers and everything else on a routine and regular basis. If they decide to use this case to try to set a precedent of an extraordinary incarceration at Rikers Island of Donald Trump, I believe that even the appellate courts of New York, and if necessary, the Supreme Court of the United States, would step in and stay the case pending appeal, or what's sometimes called within the state system, bail pending appeal. So I don't think Trump will ever serve any time at Rikers or anywhere else on this case. I think ultimately it will be vacated. There's only any risk because you've got a trial court judge that's made clear his bias and prejudice against President Trump.
Well, then, of course, the question is he can appeal. Dershowitz is not convinced that he'll be successful on appeal, despite the complete lack of merit in the case.
Yeah, the issue, Dershowitz's concern is that the same judicial bias that infects the Manhattan courts will infect the appellate division of those courts, and then the New York Court of Appeals, which is their equivalent of a Supreme Court in Albany. However, what I have confidence in is that if those courts fail, the unique issue here is that President Trump has a bunch of robust federal constitutional issues, which would give jurisdiction over the case to the Supreme Court of the United States. He has First Amendment selective prosecution issues. He has Fifth Amendment due process issues of all kinds, not defining the statute, not being told. Basically, what would happen if you went through a Kafka trial? Well, the due process clause of the U.S. Constitution is what prohibits that. You can't have a conflicted prosecutor involved. You can't have a conflicted judge involved. You can't have a conflicted jury involved. You can't deny someone their right to confront their accusers with meaningful cross-examination. You can't exclude critical exculpatory evidence and being the right to present a defense and present witnesses. You can't instruct the jury on a matter of law in such a way that you deny them the right to a unanimous jury on an identified crime found beyond a reasonable doubt. All of those due process violations, all those violations are due process violations under the U.S. Constitution, and thereby give the Supreme Court of the United States jurisdiction to hear the appeal. And then he has additional issues in terms of what happened in the discovery part of the process, what happened during jury selection, what happened with venue and vicinage, that the jury wasn't an impartial jury. It could be from the get-go. And of course, the big one, the impeachment clause presidential immunity aspect, which the Supreme Court is currently adjudicating, and given how they're adjudicating it, may vacate this verdict before sentence even comes around.
And if this were to go to the Supreme Court, you're saying that you think it's likely that they would hear it before the election?
There's two ways they can hear it before the election. One is by a bail pending appeal or a request of stay of sentence pending appeal. So let's say there's some incarceration sentence and the judge orders him to start serving it immediately. He can request bail pending appeal from that judge and a stay of the sentence. If he denies it, he can request it from the appellate division. If they deny it, he can request it from the New York Court of Appeals. And uniquely here, because of the federal constitutional issues, if they all deny it, he can request a stay of sentence pending appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's one way they could hear it on an expedited basis. The other is the decision they're currently handing down. So if they hand down a decision that says you cannot prosecute a former president of the United States without first impeaching and convicting him, the judge has to vacate the verdict and doesn't get to sentence him at all. Or they could do some sort of hybrid ruling that says you have to make an individualized analysis about what's presidential and personal, and strike what's presidential from the indictment, not allow evidence on that at trial, instruct accordingly to the jury, none of which occurred here. The judge refused to grant any credence whatsoever to any aspect of the immunity and impeachment clause and Article 2 issues. That would require the judge also vacate the verdict and go back and restart the process all over again. So that's how SCOTUS might have more to say about this long before Election Day.
Hey everybody, Father's Day is around the corner, and you do not want to get your dad another knick-knack that's going to clutter up the house, or heaven forbid, another pair of socks. Get him something he actually wants, and you know he would love a world-class steak of the kind you get from Omaha Steaks, which the old Woods family here has been using for at least 12 years. The Father's Day experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to put a smile on the big guy's face this summer with hand-selected gift packages starting at just $89. Just go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code WOODS at checkout for an additional discount when you shop gourmet gift packages for Father's Day. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. Endless flavor, endless variety, and endless value. Truly, they have perfected more than steak, and your dad is guaranteed to love every bite. Pick from premium proteins like juicy pork chops, air-chilled chicken, and beefy burgers. Go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code WOODS to get an exclusive savings. Shop for unforgettable gifts that are guaranteed to make Dad's day. Because if there's one thing Omaha Steaks knows, it's that dads want steak. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code WOODS at checkout to save on exclusive packages starting at just $89. Well, the question about how this affects Trump's electoral prospects is an interesting one because, of course, there are going to be some what we might call normies who are quote-unquote independents who might have been willing to listen to him, but now I can't vote for a convicted felon. But on the other hand, I have seen... Now, all right, look, I've curated my Twitter feed pretty well, so maybe I'm only seeing certain kinds of people, but I have seen some people saying, I was not considering voting for Trump, but I cannot allow this to stand because it's not good for anybody, so I'm going to vote for Trump so that I can register a protest. And who knows which one of these forces will be stronger.
My view all along has been that because these trials are show trials, and would be exposed as such as people got up close witnessing them, that the net effect of these cases would backfire. Robert Kennedy was saying that just yesterday as well, that in fact that Trump will rebound to his benefit. Yeah, I think he had a near record-setting day. I think $35 million in 12 hours raised after the verdict for his campaign. So one of the best days of any individual candidate ever. So clearly it will have intensity amongst his base. Also, to the degree you have low propensity voters, people that might want to vote Trump, but generally think elections are a waste of time. This kind of issue tends to motivate them. They're like, I'm just going to send a message by my vote. So I'm really going to vote this time because I oppose all this lawfare. And then you're right. Amongst the groups that feel impacted by this, it's a wash. That the people that say, now I have to, I doubt whether I vote for Trump, they are equally or often outnumbered, depending on the location, by people who are like, screw this, I can't tolerate this. I mean, you're going to have Kennedy supporters, you're going to have libertarian supporters, you're going to have some others that were not planning on voting Trump, being like, this is so damaging to our country to allow this to stand, to allow this to be politically rewarded, that Trump will rebound from it. And then, of course, it will continue to help him benefit in the African-American community, Latino community, or any community that has experienced the harassment of the state. They converted a rich, old, white guy, billionaire from New York into one of the brothers, to an underdog, to an outsider, to an outcast, to an outlaw. They keep making Trump a hero. By things that Trump isn't even deliberately setting out to do amongst the constituency that might have been skeptical of him to begin with. It shows their political incompetence. They're really like the Soviet-style show trial people who really thought, hey, if we do the appearance of a trial, then people will clearly have this confidence in the outcome like they would if it was an honest trial, when in fact the mere doing a show trial is what undermines any confidence in the outcome of that trial.
Well, the thing is, it's very, very obvious that people who are cheering this verdict couldn't care less about the details of the case. They want to get Trump regardless of what it takes. And so, imagine thinking of the legal system as an instrument for you to use to vindicate your petty hatreds. And that describes tens of millions of people you and I live with every day.
Absolutely. And it's really a mindset that's almost like French Revolutionary kind of mindset. The council has met and judged you, and to the guillotine you go. And instead of having the mob on their side, they're going to have the mob turn against them, because in America, that mob still has core beliefs in what a trial is supposed to look like and what American liberty is supposed to represent. And that's what they've misread all along. They are so accustomed. Usually when they did this, they abused the rights of outsiders, true outcasts. People who most of the country either didn't know or didn't care about. So my libertarian friends and some friends on the left are like, hey, there's been abuse of the legal system for centuries in America. That's true. It's just normally when they did it, it was someone that the public didn't know or didn't care about. Now they're doing it to the leading presidential candidate and former president of the United States who has half the country behind him. Yeah. That was their big mistake, is that they couldn't play. They could get away with it when most people were in the dark. They can't get away with it when everybody knows who it is you're doing it to. And that's the problem. It's one of the, whether you call it intentional or accidental, benefits of Trump. He keeps exposing the corruption of the media, the corruption of the deep state and our intelligence apparatus, the corruption of the Justice Department, and now corruption of our entire legal system, civil and criminal, at the state and federal levels.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very strange way to try to demonstrate that there's no such thing as a deep state. You have the one guy who's moderately an outsider in all this, and you throw everything overboard to get him. Now, a smart person watching this would conclude that what this means is that if we want to get you, we can get you. We'll find something. Like there's no way with the arcane laws and regulations and everything else on the books that if you're unpopular and you humiliate the wrong people, we'll get you if we want to get you. That's the message, it seems. If you're smart, that's the message you should be hearing from this.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. That they can make up a charge, they can drum up a charge, and you can be the former president, future president, billionaire, and we can still railroad you. And that's the point of that. They're showing their raw power. But what you also realize is when they start asserting their raw power, when they got to roll out the tank and threaten the guy standing in front of it, then the system knows that it's losing credibility. It's losing the capacity to control the populace, that they're having to resort to these extreme remedies for someone who's just mostly a nuisance to them, not someone who has actually tried to take them out or destroy them, but someone who's just says, well, I'm not going to do everything you tell me to do just because you tell me to do it. And they're so outraged, so enraged by that they demand he be made an example of to terrify everyone else. Same reason why are they obsessing over Julian Assange after they've tortured him for a decade anyway, by the long times he's been stuck in isolation, because they don't want anyone else to think, hey, I would like to be Julian Assange. Same with Edward Snowden. Why he can maintain this after everything that Snowden said proved true about the corruption of the system, such that he couldn't blow the whistle internally without ending up Hillary Clinton someplace. And so there's no question about that. And they're really shoving it in our face by the people who are involved in it are often criminals themselves. They're often doing to Trump, accusing Trump, punishing Trump for their crimes that they've projected onto Trump. And so it's very much, I think it was Sinolson, I'm mispronouncing his name, who said, they're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. And that's the point. And there's definitely a part of that that's definitely true. But I think their problem is the fifth pillar of power is the perception of power. And they're unmasking themselves so badly, like something out of V for Vendetta, that they're risking a massive political and public backlash that could destroy their institutional credibility and power forever.
Do you think at this point, in the short run, we're going to start seeing states trying to disqualify him from appearing on the ballot?
No, because of the Supreme Court's decision earlier this year. So that the Supreme Court's decision was so broad that it will be pretty much impossible to do so. The merely being convicted has no impact on the ballot. On any the presidential qualifications for the ballot are controlled by the U.S. Constitution. States can't add to that. Supreme Court said they don't get to interpret the 14th Amendment to keep Trump off the ballot. And to give people an example, Eugene V. Debs, while convicted for sedition, no less, ran for president in 1920 from his prison cell. Indeed, even if they locked up Trump, Trump can be elected president from his jail cell like Eugene V. Debs could have. So they won't have any success on being able to strike him from the ballot. They're hoping just to damage him enough in the court of public opinion that he doesn't win the most votes.
And I'm sorry I have to conclude with kind of a dumb guy question, but I just, it's my own fault. I haven't kept up with it. But after this New York thing is out of the headlines, is he facing anything else? Is anything else pending against him?
Probably not, because the Supreme Court's, the quickest case could be the D.C. case, but the Supreme Court is likely to rule the D.C. court was wrong about how it interpreted presidential immunity under Article 2 in the impeachment clause, and at either require dismissal of that case or require the court to go through and analyze what's okay in the indictment, what's not, what could be evidence, what's not. And that makes it highly unlikely that that case reaches trial before Election Day. The Florida case is going nowhere at all, the documents case. Same with the Georgia case. So it is highly unlikely Trump faces any more trials between now and Election Day.
So are you telling me there is a possibility that, yes, obviously he's suffered financial and reputational damage that I don't want to overlook, but he could nevertheless somehow come through this?
Yeah, indeed, he may be the ultimate Teflon Don. His old joke years ago, I could shoot somebody in the middle of the street and still be fine. Here they had to make up crimes to try to get him, exposing the criminal justice and civil justice systems in the process, especially in New York, but across the country. And I think at the end of the day, Trump will never serve any time in jail. All of these cases will end up being dismissed or vacated. He will end up back in the White House in January 2025, where the people around him, and hopefully he himself, motivated to realize, we need real institutional reform, as he said at the Libertarian Party convention. I wasn't always a libertarian, but then they indicted me 91 times. So let's hope that unleashes the libertarian side of President Trump, because once he gets back into the White House, where I think he'll be in about 6 months' time.
Well, of course, I'm going to link on at tomwoods.com/2500 and in the video description to your locals of VivaBarnesLaw. But is there any other link or website you'd like to tell people about where they can follow you and anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an organization I helped found called 1776lawcenter.com. Basically, we're fighting for food freedom, political freedom, financial freedom, medical freedom, the right to buy food directly from the farmer without getting government permission in advance, the right to not be injected with things you don't want to through vaccine mandates and things of that nature, and other aspects of medical freedom, political freedom, right self-defense, the right against censorship, the right against their surveillance state, financial freedom, the right to crypto and Bitcoin and other alternatives outside of the central bankers and central planners' control, fighting for that in the court of law and the court of public opinion. And you can help support it, or simply, stay up to date on big cases that are impacting those rights at 1776lawcenter.com.
All right, that's where you should go. I'll have that link there also. Robert, thanks for coming on short notice, because the country sure needed to hear this.
Glad to be here.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.